freedom is indivisible. And when one man is enslaved, all are not free.
Modern war has become a struggle for men's minds as well as for their bodies. Today we face an enemy who spends enormous sums of money and manpower all over the globe in an attempt to subvert the thinking of the people of the free world, to confuse, divide, and ultimately to subjugate.
It is a contest unlike any we have ever faced in our history as a nation.
Contest for the minds and hearts of people around the world, all people.
When power corrupts, poetry cleanses. We must never forget that art is not a form of propaganda. It is a form of truth.
Yes, in modern warfare, our military leaders are finding that words and ideas are highly effective weapons.
We have a lot of stuff to talk about. First up, we have to talk about the protests and riots. Now, I'm going to try to be pretty quick with this, because everyone's talking about this stuff, and I'm sure you probably heard quite a bit about it. However, even if by the time you watch this and the riots have been broken up, the points I make will still apply, because this will not be the end. After all, it's an election year. I have a feeling these riots are going to be pretty common throughout the summer. They will find a reason, whatever reason. Chaos is the plan. So first, I watched some of the clips of the actual protesters, and I gotta say, it's truly incredible how little they know. Nepotism and narcissism, that's all we're getting from the Ivy Leagues. These people are not only clueless, but they are unbelievably naive. They have not even realized that they're being used as the useful idiots by people within their own ranks. Now, one of the ways we got into this situation, though, is because these professors and administrators gave up on education and instead preach ideology. And then after that, they created conditions where students view blind activism as a key feature of their social caste system. And well, that backfired a little bit. Or maybe, just maybe, it didn't backfire at all. What if that's the entire plan? You know the old saying, we don't want a nation of thinkers, we want a nation of workers. Well, nowadays, they don't want a nation of thinkers, and they don't want a nation of workers either. All they want are naive activists. And well, they have that. Overall, they have weaponized the isolated, the depressed, and the nihilistic, which are pretty standard tactics, to be honest. However, these protests are really a case study in social engineering. From 2011 to now, their narratives and messaging created this situation. The establishment lost control of their own Psy-Op. Anyway, personally, I don't think anyone on the right or of an independent viewpoint should throw them a lifeline. We should just let it implode. However, at UCLA, for example, they just let them duke it out. And I've seen numerous videos of people being bashed in the head with pipes. So, I don't know. You gotta stop the violence, I guess.
Way through the quad. Look at this. Somebody is being beaten. Somebody is being beaten with a stick and punches in the middle of the lawn.
Don't do that to him.
Somebody is being badly beaten at the bottom of that brawl right there. Look at that. Look at that. Somebody is being dragged and beaten in the front of that plywood wall. Just incredible. Like, where are the police? Where is security? Where are these people? Just where is authority here? It is something I have never covered without any sign of enforcement, law enforcement, security whatsoever. This has gone now on for over an hour and a half, and it is absolutely appalling, in my estimation, that we have not seen any response. I've just never seen it.
Regardless, they're all idiots. I don't know what to tell you.
In a spectacle of misguided valor, the privileged warriors bravely advanced, placing their faith in Rubbermaid and patchouli oil. But the guardians of order stood resolute, repelling the advance like the steel curtain. The would-be revolutionaries met not with victory, but with the cold reality of life. Echoes of the folly of youth reverberated across the nation, a cautionary tale immortalized in the annals of absurdity.
So we're moving on, kind of. This next story goes hand in hand with the riots. The FBI had a recent warning, and I quote, we are increasingly concerned about the potential for some kind of coordinated attack in the homeland, which may or may not be that different from what you saw against the concert hall in Russia a few weeks ago." End of quote. Now, if you remember, the US government gave a warning about that attack, which killed over 140 people, a few weeks before it was carried out. And now we have that warning for us. You know, there's a lot of possibilities with this. We have the southern border wide open, with clear-cut examples of terrorists being let in, so this could be real. We also have a lot of disillusioned, depressed, and nihilistic political activists who are desperate for meaning. All you have to do is see the recent examples of people lighting themselves on fire. They are currently celebrating the self-immolators and even praising martyrs and infantata. So yeah, you know, we're just one step away from these dummies performing acts of jihad. And you know, in the future, we might get jihad for climate change. Wouldn't that be something? So, let's talk about what we have on the other hand, the possibilities of this warning from the FBI being quote-unquote not real. Now, some kind of false flag operation would give credence to the establishment's tyranny, that's for sure. It would give them ammo to argue that their unconstitutional and warrantless spying bill was actually necessary. Remember though, it was not necessary at all. And finally, I actually argued with some lefties on social media about this. I tried to warn them for their sakes, and really, all of our sakes too. Because they don't seem to understand what they're getting us into. They emboldened the national security state and clapped while they persecuted their political opponents. However, if an attack does happen, they will use those same powers against them. They will, eventually, crack down hard on these Palestine rioters. And it's probably going to be after once they get a think tank to explain how damaging it is to the electoral projections. Because again, they only care about political power. There is no moral compass directing any of their actions. However, once that happens, in turn, more draconian policies will be implemented and used against pretty much everyone, us included. More domestic powers that will be abused. Basically, we all lose. For example, the House just passed the anti-Semitism bill, which is just a way to gut free speech. Let's hope it doesn't pass the Senate, but I don't have high hopes. After all, we're dealing with an amoral uniparty. There's simply no winners here. All of this is an effective divide and conquer tool. And, oddly enough, it has the potential to rip the entire world apart. And finally, let's get into a conspiracy theory just for fun. You know, I find it very, very interesting that this is exactly what the Albert Pike prediction was all about. Whether you believe that's a real thing or not, doesn't really matter. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I did a video about this whole thing and broke down different aspects. Anyway, the story goes that Albert Pike predicted all 3 world wars. And for the 3rd World War, he predicted that it would pin the Zionists against the Muslims, which would culminate with the anarchists, the socialists, and the nihilists, capitalizing on the chaos and ripping apart the social fabric. And so he says the last group to get involved, according to Pike, are the, normal silent majority types, finally having had enough of the quote-unquote social destroyers, and then all-out chaos consumes the world. Now it kind of sounds like we're seeing that play out in real time, doesn't it? So yeah, there you go, just something interesting to think about. But let's get to the main story, the upcoming pandemic treaty.
We will have many body bags in front of us if we don't behave.
And I quote, "The reason we are so controlled is not that we don't have the power to decide our own destiny. It is that we give that power away every minute of our lives." End of quote. And that's what they want people to do with this pandemic treaty. Hand over your power to them. In my opinion, everything is being done right now through the lens of chaos. It is a chaos plan. The same thing applies with this treaty. Except for this, they want to use fear and the Hegelian dialectic. Create the problem, exploit the problem, get people to demand that something must be done, and then you offer the solution. Now, you are going to have to excuse my very bad Latin. It's going to sound like a stereotypical American trying to speak Spanish in some kind of old comedy movie, hablo por telefono, that kind of thing. Anyway, here it goes. The chaos plan can be summed up by the Freemason motto, Ordo ab chao, order out of chaos. Yeah, I did kind of butcher that, but let's just keep going. Alright, so you create the chaos and then offer a way to restore order, their order. And so, in general, the masses are herded and directed by many forms of emotional and mental control. It's a rather effective method, and they know this. They have studied the human brain, dissected our psychology, and found all the ways that we tick. Yes, that is correct. The strings have been attached. And now, they just choose when the time is right to pull them. Alright, the pandemic treaty. We're less than a month away from the vote, and they have made some changes. This is all a bit confusing, so I'm just going to give you a little warning. Remember, I'm just a dude on the internet, alright? If you have some corrections for me, let me know. The best I can do is relay what I found. However, as I said, they did make some changes to the quote-unquote treaty proposal, and on the surface it does seem promising, but in reality, I personally feel like it's just a foot in the door type of situation, leaving a lot of openings for more draconian BS in the future. As we all know, people don't seize power with the intention of giving it up. Power, specifically political power, only goes one way. They expand their power. This is especially true when it becomes institutionalized and mandated. So right off the bat, there is some fuckery about. According to Dr. Kat Lidley, there's a provision in here that's very similar to an infamous Nancy Pelosi move. Remember when she was going around telling people that they have to pass the, omnibus bill or something? Yeah, you have to pass it first, and then you can find out the details. Well, the WHO is trying to do that too. Once you pass it, then the details will be revealed. It's absurd. However, the WHO is giving it a try. And I quote, "The latest pandemic treaty draft strategy is quite similar to Pelosi's strategy, but much worse. Not only are we not going to know what's in it, but it's going to take 2 years to find out the details because the conference of parties, which we also do not know who they will make the rules as they go. So we should not agree to this." End of quote. And yeah, of course, that should end the discussion right there. I 100% agree. So, alright, they released this document right here, and let's check out some of the details. And I quote, "The WHO's recommendations remain non-binding. Article 13A.1, which would have required member states to follow directives of the WHO, as the guiding and coordinating authority for international public health, has been dropped entirely. If you remember, in the first version of this, they removed references to human rights, human dignity, and fundamental freedoms, claiming that those have no bearing in response to a pandemic disease. Removing human rights and recognizing fundamental human freedom, what could go wrong, right? You know, it reminds me of this video of Yuval Harari.
Today in the world, many, maybe most legal systems are based on this idea, this belief in human rights. But human rights are just like heaven and like God. It's just a fictional story that we've invented and spread around. It may be a very nice story, it may be a very attractive story, we want to believe it, but it's just a story. It's not a reality.
And I quote, "Human rights are just like heaven and like God, a fictional story that we have invented." End of quote. Yeah, look, this is not unique to him. I believe, unfortunately, this is a very common viewpoint. You have to realize that the people dictating your future have the most soulless outlook on life, and this inherent anti-human sentiment rests at the core of pretty much everything they do. Anyway, when they removed references to human rights and human dignity, every single person pretty much pointed that out. So they backtracked, which I guess is a big win. But we have to remember, as I said earlier, this is just a watered-down version. In order to get the treaty passed, with caveats for adding back in this dystopian language in the future. Do not trust it. In my humble opinion, they revealed their hand in the first draft, and in the future, they will ignore fundamental rights when it comes to pandemic responses. So, just keep that in mind. Up next, we have provisions that would have allowed the WHO to intervene on the basis of a mere potential health emergency. Well, that's been dropped too. A pandemic must now either be happening for real or likely to happen in order to activate their new powers. The WHO must demonstrate that coordinated international action is really necessary, which is insane that that was not the case in the first draft. Alright, so what do we have next? Well, proposals to construct a global censorship and information control operation, which was a key aspect in the first draft, have also been dropped from the treaty. However, trust me, the entire world is ramping up censorship. They're not going to give up on that, at all. And for proof of that, all we have to do is look around the world, to places like Canada, Australia, the UK, New Zealand, and the United States. The misinformation and censorship racket is alive and well, and still expanding. Alright, next up, they deleted the language that would conflate global health emergencies to include things like climate change and food supply issues. And so again, we know this is complete bullshit too, because the US just declared a national climate emergency, and they continually talk about how climate and health are one and the same. This is a hallmark of Agenda 2030 and the Biodefense Act that's recently passed. We're going to talk about that soon. But yeah, you probably heard about this. The White House is considering declaring a national climate emergency and developed a plan that would allow the government to invoke pandemic or wartime powers to address the issue. Yeah, that's a big problem.
The White House is considering declaring a national climate emergency to unlock federal powers and stifle oil development. That's according to Bloomberg. Meanwhile, the administration is announcing several projects this Earth Week. The plans include solar energy conservation, clean water, green transportation, and cutting pollution. For some analysis, we want to bring on Melissa Lott. She's a professor at Columbia University's Climate School. She also hosts the Big Switch podcast, which explains how to rebuild our energy systems. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me what a climate emergency is and what that might entail.
So when we talk about the potential for the president to declare a climate emergency, what it's saying is, you know what, there's a national emergency going on, and I need extra powers to be able to respond to it to protect the U.S. This is a contentious decision. If it's made, this discussion has come up many times, but if it is made, then the president would have additional powers in the short term, almost immediately.
And you might have saw this too. AOC was just bragging about how they are employing 20,000 federal employees in the Climate Corps, which is essentially Mao's Red Guard of young impressionable minds, willing to destroy the innocent for their perceived better world. And so we really have two options to decide from. One, they are completely out of their minds. Or number two, they are incredibly stupid. And I'll let you decide that one for yourself. Let's get back to the treaty. So, bold plans for the WHO itself to police compliance with the pandemic policy have all been watered down as well. These include surveillance mechanisms that would have given the WHO a mandate to find thousands of potential new pandemic signals, health passports, forced technology transfers, and diversion of national resources. All of that was watered down or removed. Now, I actually skipped a few of the details, but you get the point. In their attempt to get this passed, they removed or watered down their most tyrannical plans. And that's mostly because of conversations that you and I have. And just, everyone pointing out that this is not what it seems. Which, by the way, is exactly why they constructed this censorship regime in the first place. Just by all of us pointing this stuff out, they had to perform a sort of strategic retreat. This is all still in negotiation. However, this time, they have been pretty clever about the wording. All of this can and potentially will revert back, which is exactly why we should not agree to it at all. It's a ruse. Look, technocracy is the end goal. And so, I'm going to remind you of a few things. Digital IDs, social credit systems, carbon taxes, carbon markets, removing free speech. None of that is going to change the climate, weather-related events, or make you safer in the event of a pandemic, obviously. However, all of their plans revolve around those aspects. It's the core to their entire agenda. It's biometric surveillance, economic systems based upon compliance with the government, and using climate science as a system of taxation. It's all a ruse to control every aspect of your life. It's all about technocracy. So, one last time, apologies for repeating myself, but it's pretty important. They might have watered down some of their most tyrannical aspirations. However, that's just to get it passed. They have already spent billions and probably trillions building the infrastructure for the surveillance and control grid. They will not give up on this. They only see dollar signs, and they believe this revolution is a quote-unquote $50 trillion opportunity for investors. They brag about this. It's about money and control. I mean, come on, it's all tied into their plan for smart cities too. You know, the C40 Global City Plan, and of course Google's Smart City List, which are already being built. It's all connected. Now the vote on this treaty starts on May 27th, I believe, so we will be paying attention, that's for sure. So to finish up, I have two other things I want to share with you, and I'll put links up for both of these. First up, we have a post from Josh Walkos, and personally, I think you should be following him. And I quote, "The United States sees the writing on the wall. They want to control this new system via the global infrastructure. As a way to ensure this control, the United States establishment has taken proactive steps to cement their status. While we have been worrying about the WHO pandemic treaty and the threats to liberty that it poses, the U.S. government has a plan to seize control of the global health security agenda. $30 billion for a worldwide plan with cross-coordination between 70 governments and U.S. agencies like Health and Human Services and USAID taking the lead. So, even if the WHO treaty fails, It doesn't mean the power grab goes away. Read this 64-page report and tell me I'm wrong. Man, I cannot say that he's wrong, because he's right. I implore you to read the thread and the comments, check out the documents, I'll leave a link in the description. Now, the other guy I want to show you, someone I just started following myself, is Jack Thompson. He has the entire timeline of developments for this agenda laid out with the corresponding documents as well. It's all in his pinned comment, so you should check him out. There's a lot of great links and connections to go through. As he says in his post, you have to look at everything in its totality. Everything, from the recent global health and biodefense bills to the recent ones on AI safety, CBDCs, the climate crisis, indoctrination through education, the bills for quote-unquote clean energy, and of course gutting the US economy, all the way to the censorship industrial complex. It's all related. As I said, he has links to each government proposal too. So yeah, check that out too. Anyway, stay vigilant, be skeptical, use critical thinking, and reject the reset. So, until next time, once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.